Hello, Refuge students. Our question for this week is, who is the Holy Spirit? And this question, between this question and the question, who is God and who is Jesus, is probably one that's a little more confusing, and for good reason. We don't always get a super solid definition of who the Holy Spirit is. But we do get some really interesting indicators of who the Holy Spirit is in the Bible. And so this week we're going to be looking at these and seeing how the Bible talks about the Holy Spirit and how that can kind of shape a definition for us. And so one time that we see the Holy Spirit is in Acts 2. And we see this, it says, when the day of Pentecost arrived. Pentecost is just a festival, and so a bunch of people are coming together to celebrate. And it says, when it arrived, they were all together in one place. And suddenly there came from heaven a sound like a rushing mighty wind. And it filled the entire house where they were sitting. And divided tongues as of fire appeared to them and rested on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. So we see that the Holy Spirit is coming in a mighty rushing wind and in fire. And so for us, a really good tool for Bible reading is to see, well, what are some other moments in the Bible where someone comes or something happens and wind and fire are involved? And we actually see this all over the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. We see wind and fire working together all the time. One place we see this is in Exodus 19. And in Exodus 19, we see God's personal presence coming down onto Mount Sinai. And this is where he talks with Moses. This is where he gives him the 10 Commandments, which is something that we look at a lot today. And another place that we see wind and fire coming together is in Leviticus 9, where we see God's personal presence coming into the tabernacle. And the tabernacle is essentially a portable temple, you know, the place where humans go and they meet with God's presence. Another place we see this is in 2 Chronicles 5. We see God's personal presence coming into the temple. And so we see God's personal presence coming into areas, and we see this happening through wind and fire. And these two images are physical images that show God's personal presence in an area. And so when we see in Acts 2 that God's personal presence is with humans, we see that is our definition for the Holy Spirit. Who is the Holy Spirit? The Holy Spirit is God's personal presence with humanity. And so we're going to be talking about that today. What does that look like? In our lesson this week, what does that look like for God's personal presence to live with humanity? So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it does you well, and I'll see you this week.